G'day and welcome to another episode of Spectrum Uncensored. Today I have with me Brigitte from Sydney. Thank you for your time today.
Hello.
Could you tell me a little bit about when you were diagnosed and what you were diagnosed with?
Yeah, sure. So earlier this year, I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism when I was a child. So probably around early primary school, I was also diagnosed with dyslexia, and then throughout childhood, I picked up some other fun non-neurodivergent things like chronic fatigue syndrome and depression, autoimmune diseases, and asthma. Yeah, so I have multiple medical issues.
Yep.
I feel like probably some of them were maybe precursors or should have pointed clinicians to the ADHD autism diagnosis earlier, like the chronic fatigue and but yeah.
Yeah,
At
I
least now
think
I have the diagnosis.
so. How old were you? Sorry, how old were you when you were diagnosed with the ADHD and the autism?
So like 30, 38.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
It's quite common for
After multiple burnouts and just just not really being able to, just constantly being exhausted and burning out from work and burning out from life, not being able to cope with social situations, having to just shut myself away. And
Yeah. And if you don't know what's going on or why that's the case, it's really, really hard to manage because you don't really know where to start with that stuff.
yeah,
And you were saying just before we started that you're actually pregnant with your first child, so congratulations in advance.
thank you.
I imagine that would be a bit harder to kind of navigate with all of those extra, I guess, challenges with everything like chronic fatigue. You're going to have that even more
Yeah,
so when you're pregnant.
yeah. Well, the fatigue is hasn't been fun, but I feel like the chronic fatigue is maybe actually more a symptom of my neurodiversity, in that because it wasn't recognized and managed, my body just wasn't able to cope with all the things that I was like being forced to do as a child, like, and as an adult. And you just,
All those
society
pressures of
puts you in
life.
those, all those
Yeah.
pressures. And
Yep.
my body was just like, no, can't
Do,
do this.
do you have many sensory issues? Like, I feel like with pregnancy
Yeah,
that a lot of
quite
that
a
kind of
lot
stuff can pop up.
actually.
Yeah.
Well, even before pregnancy, I actually have quite a lot of sensory issues. And it wasn't actually till I started training, like studying and working as a teacher and a specialist teacher, and becoming more aware of like neurodiversity, that I was like, oh, that's me. um, I was like, oh, that explains a lot. But yeah, I am sensitive to lights, and they trigger migraines. I'm sensitive to sounds. I'm sensitive to touch and clothing and tags. And I'm sensitive. I actually am very sensitive to things. And yeah, I really struggle with sensory processing. And I do find it quite exhausting sometimes if I'm, in an environment that is, loud and bright and busy and there's lots of people, and I will come home and just be exhausted.
It is. It's hard when you try to
And for
process all
everyone
those
else,
things.
they're like, but we didn't really do anything. We didn't. we're only in the cafe for like an hour, or like, so I'm like, yeah, for you.
Yeah, I found that like when I had my son, my sensory issues flared up more so because you've obviously got a new little person and they are clingy and if you're not really great when it comes to sensory stuff with touch and things, that can be quite overwhelming. And I still kind of get overwhelmed with that because he's very like likes to he's 10 and a half now, but he still always wants to like have a hand on me or have a leg on me, and sometimes it's just like, oh, I just need that a little break from touch
Yeah,
altogether. But
that
you
does
do
kind of
you.
worry me how I am going to manage that, how I'm going to manage like a crying baby, but I mean, I have worked in education for a really long time. But then at the end of the day, I can come home and switch off. You can't
That's
really
true.
do that when you have a baby.
Yeah,
You
yeah, that
can't
is.
walk out the door and be like, see ya, I've had enough.
I mean, sometimes
So,
you will just kind of be like, I know with my son, I had postnatal depression because I think I didn't know I was neurodivergent when I had him. So it was, at least you've got that knowledge going in, which will be helpful for you with navigating those kinds of things. It doesn't mean it's going to make it any easier as such.
no.
It's still going to be the same challenges, but you might be able to work out, like, you'll know why you're having those challenges. Whereas I was just like, what is going on with me? And I just thought it was like a bit of an identity crisis because obviously I went from working and stuff to just being isolated at home with a baby. And my son had a lot of like
Mm.
reflux issues. So he cried a lot. He didn't want to be put down. He always wanted to be
Oh, that's
on
hard.
me. And that was very, very overwhelming and overstimulating for me. And hindsight's a wonderful thing. But now I understand why that was such a big thing for me. So yeah, it was very isolating, and you feel like you just need to kind of crawl into a corner and just have a moment. And usually
Yeah.
that moment is a lot longer than a moment, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it is.
It can
It's
take me a little while to come down sometimes when I've become quite overwhelmed.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was
Yeah,
going
if
to
I've had a
ask
bit of a
about
meltdown.
yeah, I was going to ask about how your disability affects your day to day because feel like that's a very important thing to highlight with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it does very much depend on the day, the situation, the activities, the expectations of that day. Like, if I'm just at home on the weekend and I'm not doing that much, probably not that much. It's probably not going to affect me that much, other than like, I mean, not that much compared to like a busy day. It still does, like, it affects me all day, every day, in that, like, even if I'm just at home, I still have, like, my brain is constantly on. Like, there's no off switch. There's no just sit back and relax. Like, obviously, I can relax and watch the TV and stuff, but there's no, like, it's quite hard to explain, but there's no,
I know what you
oh,
mean. You can't
yeah,
focus on that one thing. Like, you still, even though you
yeah,
seem like you're sitting there focusing on the TV show, you're still thinking about 50 million
yeah.
different other
There's
things
still
at the same
like,
time.
yeah, it's like you can got a computer and there's like, still like five other tabs functioning and like
Yep.
lots of other things happening. And it's still like, I have to have a routine, and if I come out of that routine, it can be hard for me because I have to have like the routine to be get up, to remember to take my medication,
Yep.
which is quite a lot of that, especially at the moment. Like, so then if I don't take the medication, then it can then throw out the rest of the day, and then sometimes that can be just downhill for the rest of the day, especially then if I have to go to work and especially if I haven't taken my ADHD medication,
Yep.
then my brain is just all over the place. I forget
I always have a
everything.
giggle with the medication and how they talk about that the medications that are prescribed for ADHD can be quite addictive, but there's always those memes going around going, well, it's addictive, but yet I still manage to forget to take it, so it can't be that
Yeah,
addictive.
Yeah, I don't know if I find it addictive because if I don't take it, I'm just like, just back to my scatty, forgetful, all over the place.
Yep.
Like I don't get withdrawal symptoms necessarily. I just not a very functioning person. But then if I'm having like a very, I guess more of a stressful day, then it can be quite hard. Like I struggle with, like obviously I said, like I struggle with sensory processing. Um, I can get quite overwhelmed quite easily, and sometimes it's not even like a big event. Sometimes it's just lots of little things that have happened throughout the day that can just, there's just that one final thing that just sets me off, and then there's just the meltdown, and it's all over.
And that's
And
the thing, it looks like it came out of nowhere, but it's just
yeah,
compounded through the day.
yeah, it could be, I had like a challenging session, or I was in a meeting that went for a really long time where I had to focus for a really long amount, like longer than I was really able to, and it took more out of me. Or I had like the other day, I had a really stressful doctor's appointment because they just gave me way too much information and were asking way too many questions, and I just couldn't understand what they were asking of me, and I was just like really overwhelmed. And then I was stressed because I had to try and get back to work, and I was late, and then just everything was just felt too much all of a sudden, and then that was it, all over. And then I just have to try and bring myself back down. Whether that is like, I don't know. I find water very soothing, so sometimes that might be I take a bath, or it might be that I just have a full meltdown and I sit and cry in the shower for like half an hour until I feel better. Or sometimes I don't even make it to the shower. Sometimes I have just shut myself in the car, and I will just, yeah, all the emotions come out, everything comes out, and it's not pretty to see. But usually try and find a safe space. Has happened unfortunately at work before, but they're quite um, they're quite understanding, and they're quite good.
So
But yeah,
at
it's
work, they know about your neurodivergence and all that kind of thing.
yeah. So I actually work for a really brilliant company who actually specialise in working with children who are neurodivergent and have lots of other different abilities too, and also have staff who are neurodivergent. I'm not allowed to name them, but yeah, they're quite supportive. So yeah, I'm quite lucky in that regard, because it has been a bit of a journey to find. Like, it's quite hard to find employers who are actually supportive in
Yeah.
the
Yep.
past. As I'm sure you would probably know, like, not all employers that say that they, support all abilities actually do,
Yep.
or will actually, not everybody is able to actually understand or be able to, you know, be flexible, or so sometimes that can be quite hard. Yeah, so it can affect my social life as well, but as well as work, because sometimes, if you've had a really big day, you just don't want to then go out and socialize, or
Yeah. Yep.
I kind
Yep.
of find like big social events quite hard as well.
Yep. It's
It can be a bit
definitely,
overwhelming.
it's good when you find your people kind of thing, and you find people that you get along with that are also neurodivergent, because then they kind of just get it. And like a lot of my friends, some of them I won't talk to for like a month, and then I'll just pop up and be like, hello.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, hi. And it'll be like we never even, had that break. So that's really, I
Yeah.
found that really beneficial.
Yeah, I have some really amazing friends who are great because like they like sometimes we won't see each other for weeks or months, but you know they're still there if I need them, and
Yeah.
like we'll still catch up, and you know they're not offended if I forget to reply to their text message for like a couple of days or a week. They just
I
know
always
that
reply
I've
in my
just
head
forgotten.
and then
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I replied to that.
yeah, I do that too.
I'd replied in my head, just not physically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, growing up with a disability, obviously, some of these things you didn't know you had, or the ADHD and the autism anyway, as a child. But what was it like growing up with the health conditions that you had?
um, it was quite hard. It was a bit isolating at times. Spending spend a bit of time on my own was obviously quite hard as well. Just the general lack of understanding from like the schools, the like medical professions, also from like family, and also like employers as well. Like just not really understanding, like um, just not, I guess, just not understanding like your limits. I I work hard and I put in like 100%, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist, which I guess also goes along with the ADHD. But I also I have very different limits to everyone else. Like I can't work a 40-hour week, or that's just not like I just can't do that. And I get sick a lot, and the more I try and push myself and keep up with everyone else, the the worse it tends to end up for me. Um, and just getting people to understand that. And let's see, I missed a lot of school. I was kind of homeschooled for like 2 years
Yep.
because I missed so much school, and just kind of yeah, it has quite a bit of a impact on you. Kind of find it hard to kind of fit in and feel like you're kind of never good enough. Like however hard you try, you kind of yeah, you kind of feel like you have to try twice as hard as everyone else just to kind of keep up and
Yep.
be good enough. But yeah, and you kind of, I'm sure being ADHD, that you kind of pick up those kind of labels of being like forgetful and slow and ditzy and daydreamer, and
Yep.
being like heads in the clouds, or challenging, or being a bit much, or
Yep. If only she just applied herself better
yeah.
and focused
And
better.
yeah, and you just like, if you knew how hard I was trying.
Yeah. Yep.
Like I literally cannot try any harder. And yeah, like that does that, you know, even though you kind of that you're trying as hard as you possibly can, and like those comments follow you from childhood, and yeah, you always have that in the back of your mind, like
Yeah, it's very
yeah,
traumatic. Like to be told that your best isn't good enough. It's like, but
yeah,
yeah, you are. You're trying 100%, probably 110%, and
yeah,
just because you can't do what everyone else is doing, that doesn't mean that you're not valuable and that you're not, giving it your all. So it's quite disheartening when people do label others like that and kind
mm,
of draw those conclusions just based on expected performance in a certain way. And that's the
yeah.
thing is
I think
like,
like this. Sorry. Okay.
no, you're right. I was just gonna say it's like just because you can't focus doesn't mean you're not smart. For example, it's all
Yeah,
everybody's different.
yeah. I was gonna say, like, I think these days we do recognize like everybody has different abilities and strengths, but I do still think like the school system has a long way to go in recognizing that, like, everybody is different and that you can't just judge everybody by like one standardized testing system or
Yeah.
one way of learning, because not everybody's the same. Like, and that can actually be quite damaging, saying like, you know, oh, just because you don't learn this way, or because, you know, your you know your best isn't, you know, the same as this person's, it's
Yeah.
not, you know, it's not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we all process things differently is a good thing, because we wouldn't have half of the, the amazing technology we have now if we were all the same. So it's, you don't want everyone to be the same. So it's quite weird
Yeah,
that there's that culture of trying to make everyone the same. It's actually very counterproductive. So it's,
yeah,
and why I like to ask the question, in regards to accomplishments in your life, because a lot of people, think they haven't really accomplished anything. And I think that's more down to that they've been told that in a roundabout kind of way, through things like schooling, like being not being good enough or not doing their best. So, what kind of accomplishments have you, had in your life? Because it's, yeah, I think
um
it's very important to highlight that stuff.
yeah. So I mean, to be honest, it did take me quite a long time to see my accomplishments.
Yep.
I have been through quite a lot of therapy throughout my life, for various reasons. But I'm quite proud of where I am now and the things that I have achieved. Like, I have lived independently for like a lot of my adult life, and being quite an independent person. I mean, I haven't always done a great job of it, but I've survived. I'm still
Yeah,
alive.
that's definitely an accomplishment.
Yeah, I've travelled, mostly by myself. I've been to Europe and Asia. I've been to the Middle East, New Zealand. I actually have lived in the Middle East for a while, where I used to teach over there. Um, and I'm in Australia, where I was actually born in the UK. So I moved to Australia by myself. I came backpacking and decided to stay.
Yep.
Got sponsored. Um, got my permanent residency. I worked hard and I got my diploma through TAFE. And I also got my teaching degree through Charles Sturt as well,
That's
which
awesome.
was
Yeah,
very hard.
yeah, and that's the thing is, I love that question, because it makes people really have a think about what they feel is an accomplishment rather than what they think other people will think is an accomplishment. Because I've had some very interesting answers, and I've loved all of them, because you can tell that it's the person really digging deep and going, this is what I feel is an accomplishment, because we're focusing on what we think others want to hear, or what others will believe is an accomplishment or a good thing. So
Mm.
it gives you a little bit of almost like self-discovery, a little bit like you become a little bit more aware of what you have accomplished and what you've done. And everything, no matter how big or small, is an amazing thing, because like you were
Yeah,
saying, traveling by yourself to all these different countries, I couldn't do that. I always have to have like some therapy person with me, like a support person, because I'm just like, no, I couldn't do that by myself. So that's just, yeah, to me that's like baffling. I couldn't imagine doing that myself. So that's just, yeah. And the same with like moving to from your country of birth to a completely different country. That's just, that's huge. That's so many unknowns, and I could only imagine
yeah,
how scary that would be. I moved out of the state I was born in to a different state by myself, and that was scary. So, yeah, I can't imagine moving to a different country. And things like getting degrees and stuff, people do not realize just how difficult that is for people, especially with ADHD, because it is so hard to
yeah,
study, so hard to focus. Um, And yeah, I've often wanted to go back to university, but at this point in my life, I'm like, I just couldn't do it. I just don't have, I wouldn't have the ability to get through it. And yeah, so it's just amazing. People, I guess neurotypical people would just be like, oh well, we do that all the time. It's like, yeah, but you just don't get it. Like
Yeah.
it comes easy to you guys. So it's
Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of that was ever actually easy for me. I think
yeah.
so, part of it is I like, if I'm quite determined, if I set my mind to something, I'm very stubborn and determined to
Yep.
do something, especially if someone's like, "Oh, are you sure you can do that?" I'm like, "Watch me."
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, and I think I can be a bit impulsive sometimes.
Yep.
So yeah, sometimes I think things are a great idea, and then I just go and do them, and then I'm like, oh,
It's that
this
comorbid
is
relationship.
way scarier than I thought.
Yep. It's the
Like,
ADHD that's like, let's do this. And then you start doing it, and the
yeah,
ASD kicks in and goes, why did I do that? I want my routine back.
yeah. So yeah, like some of the places I've traveled to, I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go. And then I'm like, get there, and I'm like, what have I done? I want to go. I
Yeah,
want to go home.
I get a lot of anxiety around travel with my son because my son's autistic and nonverbal. He's got ADHD as well, and we've always planned trips around a plan B. Like if we get there and he can't deal with it, we can just go home. But when I've done trips like say on a cruise, you can't just go home, and it's that has always like piqued my anxiety and really freaked me out. So it's hard. Like if you land in another country, you can't just go home. Like you can't just go down the road, and so it would be daunting. And I think that it's funny because I keep having to remind people that neurodivergent people are like any other person. We can still be stubborn and we can still push ourselves and we can still do all those things. It's just that
Yeah,
it's a bit harder for us to do that. And so it's worth celebrating when we can get ourselves over that line because it's a big thing. I always celebrate every little small thing.
yeah,
I don't take things for granted now that I know what I know, and
yeah,
so it doesn't make you appreciate the things in your life. And so I'm always trying to make sure that I can be that person that I wish I'd had in the beginning with my son and with my own diagnosis. So
yeah.
I
I
always
think
like
that's
to
great.
ask, yeah, I always like to ask that question of, if you've got any advice for adults that are undiagnosed but suspect, because I feel like there's always people out there looking for some sort of guidance, and lived experience guidance is the best kind. So do you have any
Yeah.
advice for anyone that,
Um,
yeah.
I mean, I think if you suspect, I would definitely say get diagnosed, like get it checked out, and do your research. Like go and find someone who is like you may get dismissed the first time. Like the first time I went to my GP, she was like, "Really? You sure?" And I was like, "I want to, I want you to send me to someone." And then they came back and they were like, "Yeah, here's the diagnosis." And she was like, "Okay, make sure you go to someone who's going to listen, and support you and get the diagnosis if you suspect, because you know yourself better than anyone, like you probably are. It can be a difficult process, but having the right people around you and the right medical support is really important. um, but I think, yeah, just trust yourself. um, I guess um, getting support from your family is important, but also that may not happen. Mine are still not quite there yet.
Grappling a little bit.
Yeah, they are kind of like, don't believe it. Some are supportive, some just don't. They just don't understand. They just don't get it. It's not like it's
Lack
not
of
their
awareness
fault.
and education.
Yeah, it's not their fault. They just don't. They just don't understand.
Yeah.
But find people who will support you, and I guess, yeah, just be kind to yourself, and find there's lots of support out there now, lots of websites and things where you can get support. Even if you are undiagnosed, you can still get support, which is really important, I think. And like you said, celebrate your small wins, even if it's just getting out of bed each day.
Yeah, that's it.
Sometimes that is hard. And yeah, just be kind to yourself. Realize like everyone's different. Doesn't mean if you are neurodivergent, like you're not broken. You're just, your brain works differently, and that's okay. And you know, sometimes that's actually amazing, because you know, if we were all the same, life would be really boring, and we wouldn't have any, you know, wouldn't have any technical advances. And some of the best people, like most amazing people in history, were neurodivergent.
Yeah.
So
It's definitely it's one of those things that the society makes it seem like it's society that says our brains have deficits, but it's just a different neurotype. It's not a bad
yeah,
thing. You need different neurotypes in the world. Otherwise, yeah, it's a pretty boring place otherwise. But
yeah. Like
yeah,
I've read that like the ADHD people were originally the ones in like millennia ago that would be the people protecting the camp, because you know you have that sensory processing, and you have, you know, that different circadian rhythm and all the things. So you are the perfect person that can stand guard and stand watch, and you know you can sense all the dangers and be alert and way more than everyone else. So
yeah, yeah. That's a good
without
point
those
too. That
people, the rest of them
yeah,
wouldn't have survived.
we saved you all.
Yeah. So you know, there's
You're
benefits
welcome.
to everything.
Yeah, that's
You've
it.
got to look at the positives and not just the negatives. I'm not saying that it's not hard sometimes, but
Yeah,
you've got to focus on the positives as well.
that's it. Yeah, it is. It's ebbs and flows. Like everyone has struggles and everyone has
Yeah.
accomplishments, but people
You've
just
got to
need to
find
stop
your
belittling.
strengths. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's it. And that is, yeah, that's the same goes for everybody, no matter your neurotype. So it's
Yeah. Because
yeah,
everyone has their strengths, whether, you know, whatever your neurotype, whether,
yeah,
yeah, everyone has their strengths.
definitely. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you,
Thank
and
you
I
for
wish
having
you all the
me.
best with your pregnancy.
Thank you.
Hopefully,
It's been a pleasure to
gets a
talk to
little
you too.
yeah. Hopefully, you know, this baby is kind to you. All right,
Hope
I'm
so.
putting in a request.
Yeah,
But
hopefully it starts behaving a bit better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah, kids they never do what they're told, but it's all right. We love them anyway. But
No,
yeah, thanks again for your time,
yeah,
and I really appreciate you popping in, having a chat with me, and opening up
thank
today.
you. Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for
Thank
your
you so
time.
much. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.